Welcome to What Are You Noticing with Kish and Mitra. My co host is Kish. She is a coach, relatefulness facilitator, and improv teacher.
My co-host is Mitra. He is a Dharma teacher, relatefulness facilitator, and coach. In this podcast, we're going to be covering a wide range of topics such as
Relationships,
insights from coaching and facilitation,
spirituality,
living a good life,
Asian American life,
and what's happening for us on our spiritual journeys. Without any further ado, we hope you enjoy the episode.
Hey Kish.
Hey Mitra.
Oh, today we had a lot of different topics we were texting each other about to talk about, and then we were like, why don't we just do or try to do all of them? See what happens.
Yeah. The first one that we were thinking about is the topic of money. And part of the reason why I wanted to hear your thoughts about it is because I know that I've been working on my relationship to money for a while. And something that's a more recent development is I'm starting to do more trauma work.
Mm,
And part of the trauma work is my relationship to my parents. And my
mm,
dad has this
mm.
very particular, I would say unhealthy relationship to money. And
Oh,
so that's really present for me,
mm.
seeing how the ways that I relate to money are in reaction to what I saw in him growing up and even now.
Then the two other topics, if we get to it, is like the different dimensions of health and well-being, and then seeing other people as mirrors, taking on that way of seeing. I'm curious about though, you said your dad having an unhealthy relationship to money. Like, what does he like? Is he like not save at all and just spends it all, or is he scarcity minded, or what's the?
He's just
Mhm.
very fixated on money.
Mm,
So when I was
mm,
younger and we didn't have very much money, he was he still is, and I think, everything there's a shadow and a light side, but he's very calculating with money, and he would constantly remind me like, "Hey, like it wouldn't be that tone of voice. I don't know why I was like, "Hey." No, it would be more like this month you spent X, this much money on this. We had to spend this much money for you on this. And it's a very, I would say it's unhealthy because it's so focused on the money as opposed to focused on the human dimension. And I think now he's still kind of like that in a way, but he's more trying to flex on me with how much money he has.
oh wow, that's like the opposite. Okay, but the same pull.
Yeah.
I relate to the fixation on money because my parents ran a small business, and so all the house talk was often about the business and like how we're doing and how are we going to make
Mm,
more money, and having a lot of fights about um, really the parents fighting about like how to do that.
mm,
And and yeah, I can definitely see the ways my habits and attitudes towards money have been shaped by that, and sometimes it's like in the polar opposite, but also even though I'm like reacting in the opposite way, there's some like deeper layer of me that actually does believe what they were doing. And so I have both in some ways where I'm like, money shouldn't be the most
mm,
important thing. But then there's a part of me that does, I think, deep down secretly think like, yeah, money is like probably the most important thing. And so it
mm.
kind of feels at times a little bit schizophrenic or confusing. I remember when I was in high school, I told my parents I was going to go to college and study computer science, and then I'm going to make $1 million in my 20s, and then we won't have money problems anymore.
Oh,
I didn't follow that path, but that was definitely in my mind that money, if we had money, it would solve a lot of problems. It's
yeah.
definitely there.
How did your perspective on that change over time? Because it has.
It has changed, still evolving. Um, I don't know. It's like you said, there's like a light and shadow. I think the light side is that I had teachers early on. Like I had one
Mm,
teacher in high school to show us like Office Space, and it really early on implanted the seed of like working for corporations is terrible, and I probably don't want to do the traditional career path. In some ways, like I think that was a benefit, but I don't. Maybe it was also not beneficial to get that message early on. And I really looked up to him because he was like in his early 20s and he had quit doing the normal software developer path to become a school teacher. And so I really
Mm-hmm.
admired that. But then I found out years later that he eventually quit being a teacher and just went back to being a developer. So I don't know how that works out. Um, but then there's also the shadow side, I think, of I wonder if there's parts of me that think that like it's betraying my parents if I became wealthy or like
Mm-hmm.
or like I'm limited to a certain income threshold or something. Or even the ways in which no matter how much
Mm-hmm.
like I just recently replaced my old car. I had this 20-year-old Corolla and I replaced it with a much newer, nicer car. And I thought once I get the nicer car, I'll stop thinking about car trouble, but I still find my mind sometimes will like worry about something bad happening to the car, even though it's much newer and probably statistically almost not at all going to happen. So I don't know. I think the main thing was that I had to like teach myself to spend money. I remember like in college and grad school, I was like, I'm making more money than I'm spending. I can spend money on nicer things and trainings and skills, and it's okay to do that.
What you just said reminded me of when I started my job, my first job after college. I was getting paid a lot. I was getting paid six figures, like right out of school.
Mhm.
And I was making way more than I was spending. I was living in
Mm,
Pittsburgh, so it was relatively low cost of living. And I remember when I was looking at different retreats to go to for
mm,
spending my winter break. And I saw the one at Maple, and I don't remember, it was probably like $1,500 or something. $1,500 circling retreat.
mm,
And I was like, wow, that's a lot. Like it just felt like so much money to spend on myself
mhm,
for a
mm.
retreat. And now that I'm
Right.
in the world of retreats more, I know some of them are just really expensive. And that one was like pretty normal, I would say.
Hmm.
And
Oh,
eventually I think maybe it was a similar process where I just came to this sense of what am I spending my time doing working if I can't even use the money to do the things that I really care about? And I think that
mhm,
was
mhm,
also a different perspective for me. Like, instead of focusing on saving for some future, it was really about using the money to buy myself the kind of life or the kind of development that was really important to me.
Yeah, I just finished reading this book by Dr. Ellen Langer. She's like one of the OG researchers in mindfulness. She studied it like back in the 70s. And one of her main points of the book is risk is all subjective. Like we label people as taking risks, but to them, they don't feel like it's risky at all.
Hmm.
Like her main point's kind of like something like if you're in their shoes, then everything they do. There's like a way in which my parents, like coming from, pre-industrial Korea, where they didn't have any money and they like immigrate to a new country and start over. There's the way in which like they didn't update to what are the new circumstances once we had money, or even just like in the American context. And I can feel in myself the way I'm still updating parts of my child that like still feel unsafe and like worried that the net's gonna drop or something. And I'm like, I think I have enough skills and health and social capital and savings, like I will be fine. And yeah, it's still I can notice the parts of me that still like irrationally think it's not safe and to like coach it and it's funny because now I actually like work a lot less. Like this past year has probably been like the least I've ever worked in my adult life since high school. Probably even before, actually even, I don't know, maybe ever
Oh
actually.
my
Because like school's
goodness.
still working.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so it's I think when like I pat myself on the back, I was like, yeah, I don't have to work so much and I'm doing fine. But I definitely still see the worries in my head, and I think I got that a lot from my parents of just like anxiety.
Mhm.
But then my parents actually had two different money habits. My dad would spend money a lot and and was like very generous and giving. And me and my brother knew if we wanted something, like we should ask our dad. And my mom was always stressed out about money and like always trying to hoard it. We had a huge disagreement once where like my mom was getting a new car and she was fine with like getting like a new like Corolla, like a cheaper like $20,000 car. And then my dad at the last minute was like, nope, we're getting a luxury sedan and like spent twice as much money to get a really nice car. And yeah, and that was like yeah, it was just like a weird, two very different ways of approaching money. How do you relate to money now? Are you like, do you have like a number or do you look at your spreadsheets or like how does that?
I'm not good at money. You know the
Really?
meme? I mean, I think that's an exaggeration also. Like the way that I look at it is skewed by the water that I grew up swimming in, so to
Mm,
speak. And
right.
so I think, oh, I spend so much money. I spend way too much money. And then when I tell Harris how much I spend, he's like, that's pretty normal. That's not a
Mm,
lot. It's really a matter of perspective, but I do think that I kind of went from one extreme, which is kind of like what you're saying with your mom. My mom's also like that. I think she's changing now, but she was very frugal. Like she would
mhm,
drive out of her way to go to a grocery store that had better deals, and she would really be very thrifty. And in the winter, she wouldn't turn on the heating. In the summer, she wouldn't turn on the AC. The house would be either really cold or really warm. And just that kind of very extreme, in my mind, frugality. And I think in college, I started going to the other side of that where I think I was influenced by the people around me, but then also slowly you start spending more on different things. And that broke the seal for me. Now there's different things that I really prioritize and spend my money on that might not make financial sense. Like, I really care
mhm,
about, and I think this is similar to what we were talking about with the retreats. Like, I really care about self development. I really care about different ways to support myself and support the work that I do. So, like, paying
mhm,
for therapy or coaches or body work or just different kinds of things that I think are really supportive to me. I feel very little resistance to doing that, but I think my growth edge is more
mhm,
how do I also start prioritizing my future self in this and my
mhm,
financial goals. And
mhm,
it's so complicated because of my situation. And yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about. But also, another aspect of this, which I wanted to ask you about, is charging for your services. I think one of the things that
mhm.
I needed to encounter as I started coaching is how much do I charge for my time? And this question that comes up, especially in the early days of, oh, is what I'm providing worth that amount of money?
Which is like so subjective, at least in the capitalist sense. It's just supply and demand. Is there demand for what you're offering? And I work for this one startup company that's doing like meditation and psychotherapy, sort of guided meditations. And one of my tasks there is I've been talking to a lot of consulting companies to find a developer to redo our website. And the bids I get are from like $7,000 to
Mm.
$50,000 for the same project. And I'm just like, what, why are why, like, huh? It's like incredible to me. How is there such a range of thing, even though we're saying the exact same thing? And to me, it's kind of the same thing of like, to some people charging like 100 or 200 or even like $1,000 an hour is like no big deal. And then for I think a lot of my friends growing up and a lot of people I know now, it seems like a lot of money. And even when I was in Vermont, I had a therapist that luckily was covered under health insurance, so I didn't really have to pay. But then when I left Vermont, he was like, I want to start charging you privately if we want to continue doing sessions. And so I got a great deal where he was like $100 a session, which is sometimes less than what I charge people. And so it's like a good deal, but I could still find a part of me like, ooh, that's a lot of money. That's
Mm-hmm.
like $400 a month. Like that's like rent money right there. And how much do I value that? And, how much benefit is it bringing to me, and how
Mm-hmm.
much money am I bringing in?
One thing that this is reminding me of is I listened to a podcast recently about, probably you are
Mhm.
familiar with the phrase maximizers and satisficers.
Oh,
Yeah,
I just heard
so
about that.
a
Yeah.
maximizer is someone who's going to try to get the best outcome and they're really focused on that. And then a satisficer is like, I guess I think about it in terms of the secretary problem, where you just find the one that's good enough and then you're content with that,
Mm-hmm.
something that you're satisfied with.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they
Mm-hmm.
mention on the podcast, I really enjoyed the podcast, by the way. One of the things that they mentioned was
Mm-hmm.
there's so many things that aren't quantifiable. So even if you're trying to maximize, you're limited by the metrics that you can measure. And so I think when I put myself in your position of, and I've been in that position of, okay, I'm paying this much for this thing,
Mm-hmm.
is it worth it? It's so hard to answer that question. Like, what does that even mean? And how would you even know?
Right. Yeah. It's making me think back to again, I'm going to be a broken record, but this book I read by Dr. Langer, and she talks about this as well, about making decisions. She basically says you should make the best decision you can, and then once you make that decision, what really matters is what you do after you make that decision, and make that decision
Mm,
be correct. Or she talks about like when COVID happened, she was like, yeah, you should wear a mask and you should do social distance. And then after that, you should just assume everything is good because it's beyond my control. We don't have perfect information, so there's no way to actually know beyond the general guidelines. And so you might as well just assume that you did everything good and keep going
mhm.
until better information comes out. But she was like, people that tend to second guess and regret and worry about these things make even the good decisions they make wrong, and they're more likely to find problems even when there aren't any.
That's that's
I really like
calling
this
me
book.
out.
I mean, we all
Yeah.
do it. Do this recently?
Yeah, because my partner had COVID and
Mm,
I was with him the day before he tested positive, and so it really puts you in a certain mindset. I remember when we were at Maple, it's something that we
mm-hmm,
had to deal with a number of times, and
mm-hmm,
I felt myself
mm-hmm,
back in that mindset of, oh, I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. I don't even know what the right thing is. The information is not totally precise or it's outdated, and I just want to be a good person.
mm-hmm.
And I think I did the right thing, but in the process, I was really just second guessing myself a lot.
Yeah. It's making me think when I bought my car, I planned to spend 3 days to buy my car and visit different dealerships and stuff. But the very first day I visited 3 dealerships and I ended up buying a car at the end of the first day. And afterwards I was like, did I just make a mistake? Like what? I didn't visit the other places and I didn't follow my plan. It took a while, but I just convinced myself like, no, I that was the right decision. Someone else might have bought that car if I waited a day, and I saved time, and the other cars were more expensive anyway. It's like I could have just regretted forever. This also happened recently when I was thinking about like I've had a lot of heart pain about leaving the monastery and feeling like I lost something. And like I want to honor that child part that feels that way. But I was actually meditating a few days ago and I questioned, but what have I gained? Because I keep
Mm,
focusing on like just this general feeling of having lost something,
mhm,
and I haven't really specified what that is. But I also don't spend even like half as much time thinking about the positive of getting out. And so I was like, I am out. I'm not. going back, so why not just focus more on the positive side of it rather than only the negative side? Feels like this can happen to a lot of places where it's like it's impossible to know what would have been, and so having that hope or regret, like kind of self-fulfilling or impossible to disprove,
That's such a good point.
you might as well make the life we're living the right one.
I forgot who mentioned this quote. It was maximizers get better outcomes, but they're less happy about it, and satisficers get worse outcomes, but they're more happy overall.
It seems like an example of health right there. Of like,
Yeah.
on one hand, you got the better thing, but you're less satisfied. And there's a way in which, like, I'd rather feel more satisfied than gotten the best thing. It's also making me think about this question of like having not fixated only on money as the key metric, and sometimes I wonder about that. Like I could have chosen a career path that was much more lucrative. And I have a lot of friends that worked at Facebook or Google for like 10 years and now can semi-retire forever. But then I think about like there's a lot of intangibles I gained that you can't, it's really hard to pay money for. Like the friendships that I made at Maple, I think was a kind of like priceless and no amount of money could have gotten, or like the ability to live in this kind of house and all of us have the skills and values to be able to live well in a way that most people just try to make a lot of money so they can live alone
Aww.
because it's like too hard to live with people. And so yeah, there's something about like optimizing for other metrics of health or other metrics of like success.
Hmm. Yeah. And one of the things that I think about is because I was so fortunate to be in a high paying job right after graduation and just like earn a lot of money very quickly.
Hmm.
I feel like there's different realities as well that I can consider, and I'm not really keeping up with the people that I used to work with for the most part.
Hmm.
Although I do kind of, I visited a friend and I kind
Hmm.
of know about other people's lives and stuff. So I
Hmm.
I do have a sense of what it would have been like for me to stay there. And I can easily be like, oh, if I stayed there, I would have this much money, and maybe that would mean that I wouldn't have to worry about XYZ. But yeah, like you said, seeing the trade-off, and I think
Hmm. Yeah.
the most important thing to me now is seeing the freedom and having the time to pursue the things that I care about.
Yeah, there's something about I was talking to the housemates here about like this is a constant topic I keep pointing back to of like what is the commonality between us, or like what makes this house so special. And I think this is a lot of the friendships like with us and others of like there's in a way in which like for I feel like there's like a bad form of health where we have stress and it just sort of piles up more and more and more. And like being around people is really hard. And there's another type of health where like I feel at peace or content and I don't need a lot. And that's how I have a lot of enjoyment with just like,
Mm,
reading a book or being with someone. And that took surprisingly a lot of training and work to get to. I find that's somehow like rare to find. I don't know. Like actually hard to find people that like I don't know what the word is. It's like not amped up or something. Like I have an image of like a spring or something that's coiled up
mm,
and feels like so much of culture is around bombarding you with like not being good enough and wanting things and feeding fears and doubts that it's really hard to just be like, actually things
mhm.
are kind of fine.
Yeah, I see what you're talking about now.
Which then makes it possible to be like, I'm just gonna follow what I wanna like what am I interested in? Spend money and time and things that I enjoy and feel right to do.
Yeah, so much of the culture or even economy is based on getting you amped up and making you be like a
Hmm.
loaded spring.
Hmm.
And I do think that for a lot of people, that's
Hmm.
their default. mode. And I think I've been fortunate, and probably everyone in your house has been fortunate to just experience another
Mhm.
way of being, like a more peaceful
Mhm.
way of being, which just
Mhm.
feels so much better.
Yeah. I,
You seem happy about
I'm
that.
like thinking in my head, I'm like, if I had a ton of money, would I just stop? I don't think I would, but part of me is like, would I just stop working? Like, would I just like go to martial arts class and then go to the sauna and then go have lunch with friends and then read a nice book and like cook dinner for people, maybe circle in the evening, and uh, that'd be a great day. Yeah, that'd be a great day. I'd probably still want to work to like how to scale that or like how do I help more people to experience that or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I had this come up for
Mhm.
me as well because, on the one hand, I've been so deliberate in crafting my life and living the kind of life, like moving towards just living more in alignment with the things that I care about. And I recently-ish had this
Mm.
almost like crisis where I thought, should I even keep trying to be a coach? Because I really
Mhm.
love coaching. And at the same time, coaching is more than just coaching. You have to market yourself and find clients, and that kind of stuff is
Mhm.
difficult for me. And so there was a point where I just wanted to give up, and I thought, my partner, like he's really good with money. He's willing to support me financially. And then I just really thought about it, and someone actually gave me some advice, unsolicited advice, which was actually very helpful. She said, "This is your passion. I think if you don't do it, you're going to regret it." And I think that is true. Like you need, I think, like
Mhm.
the self-actualization part of our needs.
Yeah. I also hear in that like the tension between our passion versus something becoming like a chore or like business for the sake of business rather than passion. I was talking to a
Mhm.
friend a few days ago where I was noticing I feel like miserable lately and thinking to the times when recently I felt really happy. And usually they were like when I was away and visiting somewhere. And so initially my brain thought, oh, it's those places, like those physical places or those people. Like maybe I need to just like move there or I need to somehow be closer to that or find that in Nashville or something. But then I also realized, well, actually when I visited those people or went to those places, I also wasn't like I wasn't doing the marketing or on my computer all day or like thinking about how do I get clients or like how do I do this work or whatever. And I realized it was more like what I mean we did this at the monastery, like what are the hindrances that I'm in? I'm like in craving, I'm in like hatred, I'm in
Oh.
anxiety and worry, I'm in doubt whether or not I can do this. I'm in like judgments of laziness and sloth and whatever. And and I was just like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I'm spending like 5 to 8 hours a day in those negative mind states, and when I go visit friends or like I'm at these other holy places or something, I'm like intentionally not engaging in those activities, and so it made me be like, how do I like approach this work more from like the trust and the compassion and the
Mm,
peace kind of
yeah.
or mystery kind of side rather than like the default agitation and worry being like, I don't know, I gotta figure this out, I don't know how to do this. Like,
Yeah, I love adding in seeing things more from the mystery side.
hmm
It also just feels healthier. Like someone I know recently published a book review of, I forget the book, but it was a book about marketing, about how to do marketing well and with
hmm
integrity. And something that she mentioned in her review was that it might take 2 years to, I don't remember if it was 2 years to get a part-time income or 2 years to get a full-time income, But there was just something about that perspective when you're starting your own business. And there's just something about that perspective which
Hmm.
I feel like, again, going back to the spring or going back to the hindrances, we just put so much on ourselves.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
actually, we could step into this, I could certainly step into
Hmm.
this perspective of things are okay. I'm doing fine. This doesn't
Hmm.
mean that I shouldn't be doing this work. This is
Hmm.
normal. Just not
Hmm.
taking it so personally.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's something about the mystery that's interesting because the truth is like it's actually impossible to know. And I think of all the times I did things and people told me this is a bad idea or a good idea. And it's like none of us actually knew. In hindsight, it's like, oh, obviously we should have done that or obviously we
Hmm.
shouldn't have done that. But so many times we don't know and running the experiment and yeah, I have like certain conclusions that I think I've come to like through experience. Like, I think trying to make a living off of circling is going to be very hard. And so, uh, but I feel like I got that from experience. There's probably a way to do it, but it's a big leap. Yeah, I don't know. I'm in this marketing group for coaches, and the guy in that group said that like you're probably going to change your offer at least a dozen or 2 dozen times. And he says he still changes his, or he at least reviews his every quarter to make sure it's the best it can be. And he says it feels bad if he doesn't update it at least once a quarter. Uh, It's just always iterating and getting refined. So that kind of helped me being like, oh, I gotta like figure this out, and I should
Yeah.
like figure it out soon.
I feel like one thing that I'm seeing is that I really have to learn some things through just experiencing them. Like, it's impossible to really
Mhm.
know it all up front. I guess that's kind of like coding too. There's just gonna be weird parts of it that are
Right.
gonna give you a lot of trouble.
I've had this heuristic for maybe like my entire adult life where I don't know where I got it from, but I feel like there's traditional paths that have like accreditation and are more quote unquote secure in a certain sense. Like a big question is like, should I just go back to school and become like a licensed therapist? And that, it's probably much more likely to get steady work. Or there's this other path, which is like become so good at something that people want that you'll just have a lot
Hmm.
of demand because you're just that good. I'm more drawn to the second option. And in some like elitist way, I think it's better, at least for me. But there is definitely the temptation to be like, why not just take the easy road and like, you know,
Mm.
just do the normal thing.
Yeah, this reminds me of the question of what's the difference between therapy and coaching?
That could be a whole that could be a whole podcast.
It really could. There's just so many nuances to it, I would say. And one thing I was curious about is if you feel like there's another option. Like, does it have to be either follow this structure, play the rules of the game, or be so good that they can't ignore you?
I think our friend SJ is doing sort of a hybrid version where she's in a PhD program in a field she enjoys, and she's getting a full scholarship and stipend for doing it. And she also knows that afterwards she's not planning on pursuing a career in academia. And so she's trying to like, how can I use this degree and this research to help me
Mm,
fulfill my dream and vision of the next stage? Uh,
I see. Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense to me. Um, yeah, even this startup job that I work part-time for, in certain ways it's not my dream passion, but it is like steady work and I like all of the people and the things I'm learning, I think will be still applicable, even if it ends up not working out or I end up leaving. In that way, yeah, it seems like you can kind of do both in a way. I think there is this element of like, there's this element of mystery where things actually are not figured out. We're talking about like health. I feel like a key marker of health is like how well can a person navigate not knowing well? Good
Mhm,
way. Maybe not in everything, at least in the areas that matter to them.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important to see which things are in your control accurately, and then see which things aren't in your control, and of a healthy way of holding both of those.
Thinking back to this question of like health and what we're talking about now, it seems like our generations and future generations, it's like in my parents' and grandparents' generation, there were set paths, and the healthy thing was to follow that. And now there aren't really set paths available, and everyone in a certain way has to learn how to do their own thing. And it's almost, I would say, like if you're in that situation, it's almost like factor of health or well-being. It's like how close do I feel like I'm living my life that I have control over, and I feel like I'm following the path that I'm supposed to be following.
Mhm. Yeah. This reminds me of something that I thought about at the beginning of our call when you were talking about your relationship to money or your parents' relationship to money after moving
Mhm.
to the US. I was having lunch with Bloss yesterday and he gave this
Mm.
image of, I don't know if this is true, but I'm assuming it is. So when you move a fish
Mhm.
from one tank to another, apparently what's helpful to do is not just take the fish out, put it in the other tank, plop it in there, but apparently you put it in a bag with the old water and then you put the bag in the new tank. So the fish is still in the old water, but it's in a bag surrounded by the new tank. And then I don't know exactly what you do after that.
Biodegradable bag that slowly melts.
Maybe. But it reminds me of what you were saying, and you're kind of still in the old
Mhm.
environment and feeling safe, but you're aware of the new environment and the new
Mhm.
possibilities.
Yeah, yeah. There's something of that bridge from old to new, not being too sudden or abrupt.
Mhm. Yeah, but also one thing that's not healthy in the
Mhm.
long term is if you keep living your
Mhm.
life as if you were still in the old.
Right, right, right. Yeah, which is kind of like the definition of trauma in a lot of ways, is
Yeah,
living
yeah.
in past, misperceiving the current reality and misapplying reactions to them.
I definitely, it's easy to say that
Mhm.
and it's hard to do it. Like it's so vulnerable to open yourself up to things that you previously closed
Mhm.
your heart to.
No, for sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't, feels like that's the work of a lifetime for most of us.
Mm.
Always unearthing that and, yeah, learning how to be dynamic and flow from life in those moments. I feel like I'm constantly trying to build the next aquarium or like the next fishbowl and build the bag that's gonna bring me to the other place. And then there's the parts of me that are angry or confused or upset that we're in the bag and that we're going to a new one. And a lot of my therapy is like my therapist going like, Peter, you've like built the perfect container, or like you've built the perfect like system for you to get out of the old way. And it's like, yeah,
Mm.
it's true. I don't like it though.
You don't like which part?
All of it. The having to learn the new ways, transitioning from the old way, wishing the old ways were just right. You know.
Mm.
I mean, I love it too, but when I'm in it, it's like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah, I wish I did the work already, or
Maybe
I
that's
wish I didn't have to.
might be a good transition for seeing other people as mirrors.
Yeah. The reason why I proposed this topic
Mm.
is because I guess I'll keep things vague so
Hmm.
as to protect confidentiality. But basically, in my improv class, there's a student who there's a number of students actually that I
Hmm.
have strong reactions to emotionally, and this has happened so many times in circling in relatefulness.
Hmm.
I feel like you really bump into challenging personalities or personalities that
Hmm.
are challenging to you
Hmm.
specifically. And it's so easy to be like, oh, I wish they could change. I wish, I'm so excited for this class to end or whatever.
Hmm.
And actually, that's things that you don't have control over. Like you can't control the passage of time.
Hmm.
You can't control if they change or not. But the thing that
Hmm.
I did in that moment was seeing this person as a mirror of myself.
Hmm.
And, if you hate someone else for doing something, you hate that
Hmm.
in yourself too.
Hmm.
Yeah, it really showed me the ways that I hate. And it's related to my dad too, in a way. It's the ways that I hate taking credit for things.
Hmm.
I hate being proud.
Hmm.
And that's something that I can actually work with.
Hmm. What's so bad about being proud?
You
We
don't
don't have to
know?
go down this road, but
Because if you're proud about something and then you're wrong, it's
oh,
so embarrassing.
right. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
Huh. Yeah. It's interesting because there's a way in which every emotion I'm having in some way is I'm creating or choosing it. And when you told that story, it reminded me of back in the day when we were at the monastery that we were doing a vision quest, and there was one person who was really upset and spent like hours in the evening, maybe not hours, it was probably like minutes, but they had like a really big emotional reaction and were really upset about like not getting to participate or something. And I remember trying to sleep and I spent maybe like an hour or 2 hours processing. It really triggered something deep in me. And my initial reaction was wanting to blame the person and be like, that person is bad, and how dare they
yeah,
do that?
yeah,
They ruined this for everyone. This is a sacred event, and they should know better. And we told them, like, we already told them everything, and they came anyway. But I was like, well, I'm like disproportionately upset about this though. Like, I can't let this go. So there must be something. They're not causing that to me. They're already gone. Like, they're not. I don't know where they are. They're in a tent somewhere. So I spent like an hour or two being like, oh, there's something about the way they acted in that moment that is so wrong to me. Like I would never do that. And like I have the inner critic or the inner parent
yeah,
that's so strongly being like, do not ever do that. That is so wrong. It was kind of a gift. I was like, okay, well that's not, I don't need to, I don't want that level of inner critic in me. So it's like, all right, cool. I could process this and, you know, find a different way to relate to this.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah. I like that you're able to really see it as a gift. Usually it's very difficult for me to. I can like kind of see it that way
Mm-hmm.
intellectually, but
Mm-hmm.
it's I'm just like, "Ugh, I can't believe I have to
Mm-hmm.
work on this." It's like what you're saying with the aquarium. Like I just
Totally.
feel so annoyed at every step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that was like
Yeah.
4 years ago, so now I can appreciate it was a feeling that way in the moment. But
Mm,
I also hear this a lot from parents, actually. Not all the parents, a lot of the parents I talk to mention this about their kids. Like their kids will do things that are really triggering to them. And it's the way that they would notice their own
mm,
reaction to want to discipline them the way they were disciplined growing up. But it's so helpful. This is a person that they love more than anyone in the world. So like they don't want to do that. And so they find a different
mm,
way that responds and it like heals the traumatized kid themselves. 'Cause they're like, even though they're doing it to their kid, it's also healing for
yeah,
themselves. Um,
yeah.
Yeah, something nice about that.
I can see how that would be really healing. When I worked with kids last summer, I saw when I get really overwhelmed or when the kids are being like super rowdy, my instinct is just yell at them, exert control, like organize the situation, just, probably there's some instinct to shame them so that they just stop acting out,
Nice.
so that they just calm down. And it's, I mean, it really, when you're working with kids, it really pushes you to a certain extreme internally and it brings up some extreme reactions. And it was, I don't know, I could see other people treating the kids that way. I mean, maybe less extreme than what I'm describing, but, like kind of yelling at the kids, using anger. And I could just see that it was continuing the loop. And at the same time, it's like, what do you do when you don't know what to do and you're in
Mhm.
that situation?
Making me want to work with kids more because I don't have a lot of history working with kids, but I do have this memory of being like in eighth grade and at a summer camp watching kids, and they just all piled up on top of me, and I was trapped and I couldn't get out.
Oh no.
And I got so upset when they finally let me go. I was so upset. I just walked home. I was like, I'm done. And I went home.
Why did
Um,
they do that?
I don't remember. I think they were just trying to have fun or something, but I was pissed off about it. I was just
Yeah. The reason why I wanted to have some experience working with kids is because I
like,
thought it would prepare me to become a parent myself, which is something that I'm interested in.
mhm,
And I think it was helpful. I worked at a summer camp for, it was like, I think I worked at a summer camp for 3 weeks. It was two
mhm.
different summer camps. And it did show me a lot. And I'm glad I had that experience.
Yeah, no, it sounds really powerful. Sounds really
Yeah.
powerful.
I think it's also helpful to see that, well, first of all, it's helpful to break the illusion that kids are these perfect little angels and they're so innocent. I think that's helpful. I don't know how I'll utilize that knowledge going
Hmm.
forward.
Right.
But the other thing is just seeing how a lot of kids just they get their behaviors and their reactions from their parents.
Right.
And so there is an innocence to that.
Yeah. I was thinking of my mentor in college. One of my mentors in college would always sign off her emails and tell everyone like, I believe in you, and how much like,
Oh,
and it's the way in which and she was great.
yeah, I think you talked about her before. That's so
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah. She's like the archetypal mother leader, I think. There's something so nice about like I want to see people the way she saw people, and I want to see myself in the same way of like there's the element of like mystery and trust and like high expectations, but not in a judgy way, but more like I believe in you way, and it's like whatever you choose is great, but I think you can do a lot. And I think the ways in which like I judge people when we're doing relateful or coaching or something, it's like, oh, these are the areas that I'm still hindering myself. And it's like a good like a good mirror to be like, oh, these are the areas I can like believe in myself or like believe something is possible. Uh,
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of times the reactions and the negative reactions are often this like deep core where I like lose faith or trust that they're gonna get to the other side or something. But if I did, I could just
Yeah.
be like, oh, yeah, you're in it. That's great. Like, I believe in you. Yeah, this is, yeah, you're doing it.
Yeah, I really relate to that exact thing. Just feeling like I don't have the faith in myself. I don't have faith in my own Buddha nature or skill or whatever it is. And then I see it in the way that I relate to others, like especially my students.
Mhm,
And it makes me want to have a different attitude towards myself
mhm.
so that I can really reflect it and to others.
I don't know if you've had this experience as like a teacher, facilitator, coach, but it's growing in my mind that I feel like the people I attract are usually often people that they're working with issues that I've dealt with or are dealing with. They're like kind of similar to me in that regard. And it seems like there's a natural gravity of like the people I attract are the ones that are dealing with the same stuff, you know?
Mm.
I don't get a lot of like 60-year-old grandmothers or something, you know? I tend to get like 30 something or 40 something year olds that have emotional challenges and problems with anger, want more intimacy, and like, yeah, it's like very similar people. I'm just like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I know this territory very well.
Mm. That's good. I think it does work out that way,
Mhm.
but I don't think that those are the only kinds of people that are attracted to me.
Totally.
I think that's why having a consultation call is really important.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm still like I did a focus circle this morning, and there was one guy I related to, and then there's this woman that like it was like harder for me to have an intuitive sense of her experience, and I could still like, it still was like a great circle, and like got a lot out of it and everything. But it's like more of a mystery. There's certain people where I like have like an intuitive, immediate sense of like, oh, I like can read this person very easily and quickly, and then there's other people like I think I'm still helpful just based on my experience and skill and presence. But their interior experience is more of like I have to like do more translation work to get.
I've experienced that too, and I think it's confusing. There could be different causes to it.
Could also not be a problem. I'm like trying to get more prideful of like I don't get some people as quickly, but I'm still helpful to them.
I think part of seeing other people as a mirror of ourselves is it's a helpful perspective to
Mhm,
really be able to take in the ways that everyone could be a teacher to us.
mhm,
And I think thinking about that situation, sometimes what might be paradoxically really helpful for people is to be put in a situation where they don't feel seen, but
mhm.
they're still safe or they're
Right.
still agentic or powerful.
It's interesting because mirrors also can mean a lot of different things, and mirrors doesn't necessarily mean this person is the same as me. It could mean like this person is actually like mirroring my ex-boss or my last partner or my brother or my mom or my dad or something. And
Mm.
that way I'm learning about myself and also working through certain patterns.
Yeah, yeah, like when you project your dad or your mom onto someone.
That never happens. No.
Yeah, that happens a lot. It happens a lot for me and older Asian women. I project my mom onto them, especially if they're immigrants.
I remember when we did circles at Maple, and I remember once there was this older woman that was the mom of one of the residents, and everyone was just projecting their mom onto her. It got to the point
Oh,
where I felt bad for her. I was like, oh, she just wants to be a person, and everyone's just treating her like their mom, and I was just like, all right, let's do that.
yeah.
Did we summarize? What have we learned?
What have we learned?
Hmm. Use money for things that you love, and learning how to change ponds is a
Hmm.
good skill.
Hmm. Benefit of structure or things that might be more traditional while also being able to see the view of that's not the end.
I also like this frame that I never really strongly considered before, like self-actualization as a key component of
Mm.
wellness.
I like that you like that point about self actualization as a key point of wellness.
Hmm. Yeah. I think it's interesting because so much of growing up was just about survival or fitting in or doing well.
Mm.
And there wasn't a lot of emphasis on become who you're meant to be or
Hmm.
something.
I think that's I want to close, but I want to say this. I think that's
Hmm.
one way that I want to approach parenting that I think I didn't receive as a kid. Like, I think my parents looked at me and then they put ideas onto me based on what they thought was good. And what I want to
Mm.
do is look at my kids and try to see who they are and, maybe give them ideas related to that. But it's more of a help the flower bloom, support the flower in blooming.
Well, great. Glad to have a conversation,
Yeah,
Kish.
same.
Nice to you have to put the stuff on the table and be like, what is this?
Thanks for listening. This podcast was executive produced by Mitra and Kish, was written by Kish and Mitra, and performed by Mitra and Kish. Like, review, and subscribe wherever your podcasts are found.
For more information about Mitra, you can visit his website at peterxpark.com. And for more information about me, you can visit my website at kishandyou.com. Thanks for listening and see you next time.